So hello, still somebody here, good. Last speaker is always, right, not everyone has the patience to sit and wait for a German, right, to speak. And I have a little problem with my voice, so, but I didn't want to phone in sick, right, I haven't done so in years, so as an entrepreneur you don't really do this. And wanted to take this opportunity to also speak to you all here and really appreciate you listening to me. I'm kind of from a different side of business. Like what we just heard was very inspirational, and this is kind of like, as I was in my early 20s, I was also looking for these kind of opportunities, and but I didn't, and I didn't do what kind of at that point what I would have liked to do. I followed the path that was kind of pre-programmed for me, and did my education in the shipbuilding industry in Germany, and then went on to work as a senior manager within that shipbuilding industry. In Germany, the education system works a little differently to here, or it used to be at least. You would do, like as an engineer, you would do an apprenticeship first, and then so grammar school, apprenticeship, probably national service, and then go to university, do whatever you want, and then life starts. Where I'm from, you build your house, you get married, have children, this kind of thing. I didn't quite do that either, but I did work in the shipyard industry, shipbuilding industry in Northwest Germany, and because I had to, and I also wanted to at that time, and I come from a family that is not at all entrepreneurial, and so we were building ships for other people for the last 200 years. And at that shipyard, there was always a Hermann Twickler. If you think my name is in any way special, back home where I'm from, almost everyone is named Hermann, so it's not that. Like, and they always had a Hermann Twickler at the shipyard there until I left. So, and it was a very traditional business, and it turned over fine. And then I got this call from university to be offered an internship at Boeing in Seattle. And that was kind of my way out of this little rural area where I grew up in Northwest Germany. If you ask me what's the next city, well, 2.5 hours away is Hamburg, right? So really, really a very boring strip of Germany, if that exists. This is definitely is. So I went to the States, and then really tried to take off and trying to do what I always wanted to do. I wanted to become a pilot, and spent a lot of money on it, and then decided that I actually, in my real profession, and what I'm actually good at, or what I thought I would be good at, building ships or working with steel, I could actually make much more money in this. Like at that time, airlines would pay for a junior pilot about $24,000, and I was at the same time in my late 20s offered like positions with just shy of 100 grand in US dollars, and to run like factories for people in shipbuilding. So it was a hard, tough decision, and I did fly some parcels in and out of Boise, Idaho, and then decided to go for the money. And stayed on as an employee, and I was then going into my 30s, and I felt like, I kind of internally, I always wanted to become an entrepreneur, but then kind of I said, well, I'm actually fine where I am. I have this nice company car, I have a nice salary coming in. I was all sorted, kind of, right? And my next big thing in life, I was all settled in Vancouver, Canada. I was not in a 9-to-5 routine, but not far off it too. So, and I did this merger for Caterpillar Group between two companies that were basically, where the owners were retiring. One was almost bankrupt, the other one wasn't far off it. And both of the owners basically had depleted their companies for the last 5 years, and they were good suppliers to Finning, a Caterpillar Group company. So, and I was tasked with bringing the two together and make them successful in the attachment business. So that's everything that hangs on an excavator. Little to do with shipbuilding, I know, but it's kind of the same what you do. And so I managed this merger, and we took over about 180 employees and about $15 million turnover combined, and we managed with a very inspirational young management team to grow that into 80 million over 3 years at about 15% profit. So Caterpillar was all up for it, and it would have probably also fast-tracked me a little bit, but I had to move then to the States, which I didn't want at that time. I was settled. I was a 9-to-5er. And I was very reluctant to change my career again. I was very settled and very comfortable where I was at that time. And then came Ernst & Young actually and said, well, for this, we award you Business of the Year 2003 on the West Coast. And that was on a Friday, and I really partied hard all weekend, and I really enjoyed this. And so not knowing what would happen next was on Monday, the UK called and said, well, there's a shipyard in Portsmouth that would really like to have an interview with you, or would invite you for an interview as the, what they call the yard director's position. That shipyard I'm talking about is the defense shipyard from, at that time, Vosper Thornycroft in Portsmouth. That's the shipyard they're closing at the moment. So due to, or not, right, there's the yes and no vote, that kind of thing, very political, defense, right? So I went over there and they flew me in. I kind of first turned them down, and then they flew me in first class, and they said, well, you can at least double your salary. I said, okay, if you ask me so, like, I might make myself available for a weekend in Portsmouth or in London. So, and of course I took the job and stayed there until basically the defense sector declined, and it was pretty clear that only one company would survive in defense shipbuilding in the UK, which is BAE Systems. And I felt kind of, after I wasn't offered a director's position, as in a board director's position with BAE Systems, which was 15 times the size than VT Group PLC, where I used to be a board director, I was kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say upset, but I felt like this was a big step backwards for me. So, and I decided to start my own business. So I quit my job in Portsmouth with 3,000 employees and started Pressure Fab in Forfar in Scotland with 3 employees next Monday out of a porter cabin. And I was very proud. And it was a very great moment. There were my 3 employees, there was my porter cabin, my office, right? And I came in my suit on the Monday morning, my first day in business, and there they were. These were not exactly, let's say, the creme de la creme of employees, because in manufacturing it is very competitive, like in every in every industry for that matter. But it was very difficult to attract anyone for a brand new startup business from somebody nobody had ever heard of in a very traditional environment like steel fabrication in Scotland. So there they were, 3 employees that I hired from the street. And I had them nicely fitted out in these boiler suits, and the workshop was about to be set up, and all I needed now was basically customers. And I wanted this so much, a steel fabrication company set up in Scotland, where I think per month about 5 steel fabrication companies closed down in Scotland. And everyone told me, have you not heard of China, this thing like, building containers and all that? Would you not consider like maybe going somewhere where labor is a little cheaper? But no, I wasn't. I found like Scotland was ideal for my business, and I found like the Dundee area was ideal, right between Edinburgh and Aberdeen. And I still believe that I picked this really well, considering I made this decision on my 3rd trip to Scotland, right? And so I found Dundee was an ideal location for it. I wouldn't have to compete so much with the labor in Aberdeen, and I could still deliver my goods and offer my goods to Aberdeen, which is important. That's my market, or was my first market at least. And so I started off with my 3 employees. I had a shop, I had everything, I have equipment. I even had a business partner, which I had to get rid of 6 months later. And there it was. The only thing missing was really that I didn't have any customers. And subsequently, I didn't have any revolving business, and I also couldn't really attract this that easily because I didn't have any connections. This was where my ex-business partner was supposed to come in, but afterwards I kind of found out that he didn't have any connection either. So there I was, somebody who had never run a business in his life, somebody who believed that suppliers would supply, banks would lend money, and economies would just grow. This was in 2008, so about weeks before the big crisis, then the international crisis started. in the oil and gas industry, the crisis also started, and it shaved off about the 10% surplus to requirement that was required basically to supply the industry. And I survived because of my cost structure and my enthusiasm. But actually, this was a very tough time. This was a very difficult time. And setting up something that was so traditionally, you really had to find ways to make it work. So going back to the previous speaker, and this is what I said, like, I'm somebody who set up a business in a market that didn't require my business at this time, and also in a saturated market, in a declining market, at that time at least. It's now a bit better. And it was also a traditional business where you had to differentiate yourself from what other people do. So you had to find your niche market, basically, or your market for your business, or for my business in this case. I had to find this in a completely different way than what we just heard from the previous speaker. And I hope you can understand the difference. So you can either go out and find something that is really, really new, that nobody else has, or nobody really does, and you do this with very little capital, or with whatever you have that's like available to yourself, and push this with your own enthusiasm and drive it. Ideally services. You don't need much for that, usually. Or you go into something that is very capital intensive and push this in a different way. And you need to differentiate yourself. You need to be the most expensive business on the market and still get orders. You need to be the one where people want to buy from, although they don't know you. So that was a little challenge there, right? So I tried to set it up this way, and became then in my second year relatively successful in selling this philosophy, basically. So somebody would phone me up and say, to dear, right, this to dear, and I said, isn't it great, right? What if I was too cheap? He said, that would be fantastic. I said, no, I wouldn't be in business anymore. I probably made a mistake. I didn't find my way, basically, to justify my cost. I would just sell on the market. So I would sell this radiator for £2 just because the market is at £2. And I'm competing with China. China would say 190 it is from now on. And I would say 180. So bidding war downwards. I've never done this. And I've always tried to inspire other, especially manufacturing people, to never compete on this basis. To always say, be different, be better, but in a different way. Maybe your product is exactly the same, but try to be different and try to inspire then through your product, through service, through on-time delivery. What is your customer really looking for? And that, of course, completely depends on what industry you are serving to. Like if you serve to the person on the street, you serve to the oil and gas industry, like what I do, or you serve to individuals, students, they buy too, I heard. Not from me though. And so you have to develop your market, and this is an example of what my business does. It's a completely an opposite example of what you usually see in manufacturing. And manufacturing is declining, but there is ways to make manufacturing in Scotland in the 21st century work. And that is what my business stands for. So it's a very different approach. It's a very different angle to look at it. And also, if you look at like manufacturing, it's a very financially, a very demanding environment. Like you get abused as a bank all the time. And obviously, as a young entrepreneur, you want to stay completely clear of that. You don't want to finance somebody else. You want to get financed. So, and in manufacturing, that's very difficult to achieve. So the difference mainly is that I started off and was I always had this dream to become an entrepreneur. But I actually then choose for the first almost 20 years of my career not to take any risk. I always felt like an entrepreneur a little bit, but then I realized actually I don't really own this, what I do. It's not really my money I spend or make decision with. It is somebody else's, and I had to justify obviously my action. In many cases, I did a little bit this, like, I run my unit as I run my unit. I was quite successful with that too, but it doesn't always work that way in a corporate environment. But it did give you, or it will give you, a very good base basically to start from and also to develop. What I believe Scotland needs more of, and what I all hope you all start or think about is, I believe that we all need more successful businesses. We don't necessarily need more businesses, and we don't need more startup businesses. What we do need is more successful startup businesses. There's more value in really having an idea and being like a little bit inspirational. This can be a product that is completely new, or it could be a product that already exists. You're just making it new. It's a little bit like Starbucks, what they did with coffee. Coffee wasn't new, right? So, but the way they serve it and the way they go about their business is very new, or was very new. And this made them successful. As I first learned about Starbucks in the 90s, that was for me like, well, at first as a cheap German, I couldn't really understand how somebody could pay this kind of money for a cup of coffee. But Germans are dirt cheap, and I was certainly one of them. I looked at this, I said, no way. And but Starbucks made it possible that people would spend that kind of money in the morning. And a lot of people say, well, people are just addicted to it, but that cannot just be all. So you need to find a product that really sells, and you need to make profit. So you need to be able to sell your product at a higher price than your competition. That is what selling is about. So I just recently ran into somebody at Dundee University where I kind of gave the same, well, not quite the same speech, but a similar speech. And there was a Chinese person, Chinese-born person, and he had a business card, and he had the cheapest container, like storage containers, cheapest container, £5 a week or whatever was big written on his business card. I said, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur and this and that. I said, no, you are actually trying to distribute something under value that is already there. And there is no real advantage for anyone in this. There is no advantage for you in this. There is no advantage for the customer really in it. How about you differentiate yourself a bit and have the best containers. You have something like a storage container, or you have something heated, you have better lighting in it, you take better care of your customers, or you take better care of your customers' goods, or whatever it is, and you sell a lot of that to a customer at a fair price with a good profit, rather than just do a market research basically and say, well, storage containers rent for, or storage units rent for an average of £8 a week, or whatever it may be. Let's make it 5 and I get business. That is exactly the opposite of what a new business should be doing, I believe, and where you actually should find your, whichever market you want to go into, your market niche, and should actually look at to make a clear profit, to be the most expensive, or at least in the upper half of the price range within your industry, within your competition, and market this and sell that. And really look at what can I achieve and how can I achieve it. Because otherwise you will run out of money. There's other people that are much more established, they have a much lower cost, a much lower cost base, and you will not be able to compete with them. So, and this is kind of what I'm looking for. I was one of the judges at the Edge Fund in December. And I looked at a lot of businesses then from the pair of eyes from a judge. And I looked also a little bit as a fellow entrepreneur at it, and I said, oh my, there were about 30 different businesses, and with the exception of 1 or 2, none of them would have gotten my money. Or my investment. But this was public money. And sometimes public money is well spent if it is spent in an area where no private or bank funding would be available. So, and with that in mind, I was quite happy to actually be on the board of judges there and help deciding, hopefully for a good cause, where this money is going to go. But a lot of these businesses, I feared that they would get this one cash injection and then wouldn't really grow. They would have a business for a short period of time, but they wouldn't have a successful business. And all this enthusiasm, and when you say you wake up in the morning and say, yes, I am, and I'm 4 years old, or I have to drive, I want to do something, I want to work for myself. You have to be a self-motivator. Make no mistake, there's nobody else. You will be motivating yourself, or nobody else will. So you go on and then you say, world, here I am, here I'm coming. You do this in the morning in front of the mirror, or whichever way you motivate yourself, and you have fun, you have this, you have that. You will not have fun if you fail on the financial side. In fact, if you fail on that side, or if you have for a longer period of time pressure there, financial pressure that you don't have a solution for, meaning the light at the end of the tunnel, you will feel like it will paralyze you and your business. So, and how do you make this business then go over, basically float over, and really make it financial viable? And there it comes again, not by being the cheapest on the market, not by underpricing the competition. As it first became apparent to my competition in Dundee, which I mean was like local competition, meaning everyone who was in steel fabrication in Dundee, that pressure fab was actually growing at an extreme fast rate, and it grew from, for the ones that don't know my business, it grew from these 3 employees that I originally had, including myself, actually 4, but I wasn't on payroll the first 2 years, so I wasn't really an employee. It grew in the UK to about 175 and worldwide to about 300 employees in a period of 5 years. And it turns over in the UK about 12 million pounds at the moment, and it turns over worldwide about 20. So for somebody who started relatively late in his career, who sat in a very comfortable corporate share for the first 20 years of his career, speaking here to very young people, you may look at me and say, well, but then it worked out okay. Yes, it did. But it was like in a very different way than a lot of the newer businesses now start. And my market was relatively open for somebody who was different, who wasn't like on a product that would traditionally just be given up to Eastern Europe or to China, to Asia, that somebody would come and actually produce this at a profit, at a fair profit in Dundee, Scotland. So that was kind of the drive behind this, and that is kind of what made my business really attractive then to my customers and also to myself, right? So, so that's why I'm relatively dull. We do not have any kind of sand, excessive sand in my office. My office at the moment is relatively cramped. I have people from, like, we are expanding into Africa at the moment, so there's a lot of international people in the office. And I've also made just recently 2 more acquisitions, and I moved all the office staff, basically I consolidated them all at my flagship shop in Dundee. And so it is relatively cramped. It is like maybe at first glance a traditional office, but then it isn't, and I like to think it isn't, because people are inspired. I try to inspire them. I try to not make them entrepreneurs, obviously they are my employees, right? I try to inspire them to basically to participate and to have fun. Without the sand, though, we couldn't really have that. I mean, my customers think of me as like a flippy kind of person because I'm not wearing a tie. Like, that's as far as who are you, right? And so that's kind of at most days where it goes. Or if they come unannounced, like I had some senior people in from ConocoPhillips this morning, which I kind of forgot about. They weren't really unannounced, but I just forgot about them. And so I was there, and I was just in my shirt, and I just walked through the hallway, and I said, Hermann, I said, yes, right? So good to see you. Yeah, I said, yeah, and you came in today for our meeting. Yeah, I said, good, great. So that's what in my industry, which is a little bit more traditional than a lot of other industries, obviously, what people just expect. And sometimes it's always nice to bring a fresh wind to something, but you have to be within reason and have to stick to what traditionally your customers would expect in a way, right? Otherwise, you can't be too far off the line. And as I said, for the oil and gas industry, for an oil and gas senior executive, this is as far as it goes. Like if I would wear an orange T-shirt and jeans, at my place of work, and there would be a little bit of sand there, I'm not sure if every one of these mid-60 gentlemen that are coming sometimes and looking at my office and would say, "Aha, so your children come here as well to play?" I say, "Well, I don't really have children, so it's for me, right?" I don't know if that would work. I was in Houston, Texas the other. I was actually in Lafayette, which is between New Orleans and Houston, also a little oil town on the coast. And I was there in somebody's office, and like also one of these gentlemen who have like a very traditional guy, he visited me in Dundee twice, so I needed to return the favor. And I was in his office, and I was like, a moose, a deer, a bear, everything on that. What the hell, right? And like was there, and all of his colleagues said the same, like he was surrounded by dead animal, right? And so they found this funky, and they found this great. But make no mistake, these gentlemen would not really pick up on the drive then to say, okay, I go that far apart, out of my comfort zone, and say, okay, I believe in Hermann, or I believe in your business, right? You will put a twist on it, make a change or whatever, or inspire here. It has to be like within like their remit. If their remit is here, you can be there. You can't be here, right?